Hi YouTube, this is Evie. Welcome back to my channel, and today I have another video for you all. Today we're going to be talking about edge play. But before I get into that particular topic, I did want to show everybody my shirt that I have here. It says "Chain like an animal and treated like trash," and I feel like that just very neatly summarizes my life. And I didn't want to show it to you guys because I realized you guys were only going to see this part, and you're really missing out if you don't get to see the full text. This is actually one that's from These Americans. It's not one that I designed. If you guys know from my other social media or the live stream, I opened up a Teespring store where now I'm like designing a bunch of cool BDSM themed t-shirts. And I would highly recommend checking that out if you guys are interested in it. It would definitely be like designs like this. I actually wouldn't necessarily recommend These Americans because it had a processing time of 4 weeks and then it took 4 months for it to ship, and that's a bit ridiculous. So wouldn't necessarily recommend, going to this particular shop, but the design is cool and I wanted to show it to you guys. But anyways, today we're talking about edge play. We're going to talk about what edge play is. We're going to talk about how, people define or have differences of opinion of what edge play is. We're going to be talking about types of scenes or types of play that are commonly considered edge play, and then we're going to talk about sort of how you engage in an edge play scene, or express the fact that you want to participate in an edge play scene and kind of want to figure out how to do that. So what is edge play? Like so many things in BDSM, this is not something that is very easily or succinctly defined. It's one of those where everybody's going to have their own personal interpretation, their own personal opinion, and it is very subjective. It is definitely up to your own personal feelings and reactions and relations to certain types of play, be that physical, mental, emotional, what have you. It's also, everybody's going to think about it in a little bit of a different way, but I'll try to kind of give a definition that I think is general enough to kind of help you figure out what you consider edge play. And that is basically anything that pushes the boundaries of what you consider to be safe. This is not to say they're completely 100% unsafe. They are just not completely safe. By that I mean, and this is something that I would help me to define what I consider edge play for myself when it comes to physical type edge play, would be an activity during which, even if you are doing all of the best practices, even if you have been through extensive training and you have extensive knowledge and experience performing that type of scene, you cannot get rid of all of the risks. It cannot be 100% truly safe. And something that I find is also sort of helpful to sort of figure out what is edge play and what is not is sort of edge play is when SSC kind of leaves the room, and then it's either going to be rack or prick. So SSC is safe, sane, and consensual, and it's basically a ideology around BDSM defining, what good BDSM looks like. And it says, in order for it to be a good BDSM activity, it has to be safe, it has to be sane, and it has to be consensual. Whereas RAC, which is risk aware consensual kink, is saying, not everything is going to be 100% safe. Not everything is going to be 100% sane. And who gets to define what sane is anyway? And as long as it is consensual and the people who are involved get to go into it with full knowledge of the risks, that is okay. Prick is sort of an extra layer on top of RAC, which is personal responsibility and consensual kink, and it's basically saying that, you have responsibility for, figuring out what the risks are, figuring out if it's in your risk profile, and then in addition, communicating adequately with the other participants in the scene if it's something that is no longer comfortable to you, or if you have questions about how it's going to be done. It's basically saying, you have control over your own body, and it's your responsibility to communicate and find out what the risks are. But that is a whole other rant over there. SSC and RAC and Prick are very interesting because I think a lot of times, especially online, people will say things, like BDSM is SSC or has to be SSC, and that sort of totally ignores all of the types of play for which you cannot fully mitigate risk, which is a lot of kinds of play, and it's a lot of kinds of edge play. And so I just wanted to let people know that there are other options out there, especially if you're somebody who is interested in participating in edge play. like I said, edge play is very subjective. It's up to, you know, what you define as not being 100% safe. It's up to you to define, you know, this is going to be something that has the potential or even is very likely to put me in serious physical or mental or emotional harm, but I still accept those risks and I am engaging in those risks. For some people as well, it's just things that make them very, you know, deeply uncomfortable or things that squid them out, even if, you know, they're not necessarily something that they're thinking about participating in any way. They're just like, it doesn't have to have a reason. It's just way too much for me, and the thought of it or the sight of that is just too much. And when you're thinking about all of this, you know, kind of confusing sort of, you know, what makes edge play different from limits? How is edge play different from a hard limit or a soft limit? If, you know, limits are things where, you know, I have boundaries around them, and then edge play is about things that go up against the boundaries of safety. You know, how do those two things relate to each other? How are they different? And basically, I would look at it like this. Edge play is not making any sort of statement about play that you will or won't do. It's making a statement about, you know, your own relationship with that type of play. Is it something that you consider to be risky? There are many things that can be soft and hard limits, which could have no risk. And there's things that could be extremely high risk that you do like every day, which may not be edge play for you. That may be something you are, you know, completely comfortable with, or things you consider to be 100% safe. And that's sort of what the difference is there. It's basically hard limits and soft limits have to do with your own personal boundaries for play that you aren't or are comfortable with, whereas edge play is sort of just about defining the level of risk that that play typically has. On that note, there are a lot of kinds of edge play out there, and it is extremely subjective. I have seen places that have just generally said, like, no edge play as the rules for the party, and it's sort of like, well, what does that even mean? Because everybody has different feelings about what edge play means, and that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. Like, I've had places that have been like no edge play, and no edge play meant like no ball gags, because apparently ball gags being a choking hazard is too much of a liability and therefore is considered edge play. I don't know how much I agree with that one, but so, you know, some people define edge play that way. For some people, edge play is going to be things that is like scat play, water sports, blood play, age play. Actually, is something that's very commonly considered edge play, or that at least used to be considered edge play. I think that's a good example of how subjective it can be, because for some people, age play is going to be extremely emotionally and mentally risky, or at least very emotionally and mentally draining in a way that is kind of too much for them to participate in scenes, or for whatever reason it just kind of squicks them out, and they're it's like that's like a step too far for me. Whereas for other people, age play is like their everyday life, and for them it's not edge play at all. It's literally just, this is who I am, this is how I play, and it's not like anything super risky. It's just how I go about my life and my relationships. Some other things that are really commonly forms of edge play would be anything basically involving your circulation or your airflow getting cut off for significant periods of time. So that could be things like strangulation, breath play, drowning, mummification, shibari or rope bondage. In particular, rope bondage that involves suspensions and inversions. Those are extremely risky. If you're just doing ground ties, you're not really at a level of risk, but you're not to the same level of risk that you're in an inversion. Because in an inversion, not only do you have all the usual risks of like uncomfortable circulation compression, which is not necessarily dangerous, but a lot of people don't like it, and actual nerve damage, you're also risking the fact that if any of those lines fail that are suspending you, and you know, even if you do everything you can to stop it, you can still fall right on your head and break your neck and potentially kill yourself. And obviously, that's not going to be in everybody's risk profile. So that is considered edge play. Another thing that actually defines edge play a lot of the times is risk of diseases being transferred, or just general like risk of bodily harm. So things like dismemberment, amputation, obviously things that are very, on the edge for most people. And then things also like play piercings or needle play or blood play or any kind of water sports that would involve actually ingesting the fluid or them getting on potentially an open wound or some kind of orifice. Those things can all be vectors for diseases for some people as well. Unprotected sex, and by unprotected sex, I mean sex without condoms. That can also be considered a form of edge play because there's that fluid bonding that's happening, and as well, you're not only risking pregnancy depending on what type of sex you're engaging in, but also the transfer of STIs and other diseases. Now, let's say you are really interested in edge play. So you really, really want to try shibari, or you really, really want to try blood play or needle play or something. How do you actually go about doing that? Well, one of the things that also kind of helps people define what edge play is sort of there's a higher standard of learning, a higher standard of experience that is involved in order to be able to do these things with a degree of safety. Not completely safe, but a degree of safety. And the best thing that you can do if you're interested in engaging this type of play is to go to classes. I cannot physically imagine a way that you could properly learn about things like needle play and blood play and such like without going to classes, without talking to people who actively engage in those forms of play, and without getting significant time to actually be able to practice and learn and think about these skills. With things like spanking or flogging with like a soft deerskin flogger, like those kind of things aren't going to be edge play because they're relatively low risk. As long as there's not openly bleeding wounds, you're really not going to be dealing with any sort of potential disease transfer, and it's not really going to cause any physical harm so long as you're following best practices. And with those, yeah, you can learn how to do those just by yourself, practicing on a pillow at home or whatever. Like, it's not something you really need to go to classes to learn how to do, although in a lot of cases it can be helpful. But when it comes to edge play, in order to sort of fully understand the risks and to fully understand how to engage in that type of play, highly recommend you go to classes. If you want to talk to a partner about engaging in these types of play, obviously it's going to be a sensitive subject, but go about it like you would any other kind of kink. It is about making sure that both parties know the risks involved, and that's really not going to be that significantly different in terms of the negotiation process from doing a spanking scene to doing like a heavy impact scene that's gonna, involve caning in riskier areas or something like that. Like, there's definitely more conversation needs to happen around the risk, and maybe negotiation will take longer, but those fundamental things that you do during negotiation are still going to be really important. And if you guys don't necessarily know what I'm talking about, I do have a bunch of videos about talking to your partner, about getting involved in new kinks and introducing kink to a partner. I will link those down below in the description if you guys want to watch those. But that's basically everything I wanted to cover in this video. If you guys have any questions, comments, etc., please feel free to put those down in the comments section below. Links to all of my social media, my Patreon if you guys want to support this channel. It would really mean a lot to me, and I will put a link down below for that as well. And as always, I hope you guys have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week. Bye-bye.